Are you suffocating under the weight of credit card bills, constantly stressed about money because you're financing an inflated lifestyle you can't actually afford? You're probably working yourself into the ground, sacrificing precious time with your family just to pay off debt for stuff you don't even remember buying. The good news is that you don't need a six-figure salary or a complicated financial scheme to break free from this plastic bondage. By adopting battle-tested, no-nonsense mantras like finally learning the difference between a real need and a fleeting want, you can stop nickel and diming your way into poverty. Listen from 10 Secrets of Spend Well, Live Rich by Michelle Singletary to discover how my grandmother's simple, tough love wisdom can help you escape the debt trap, reclaim your freedom, and finally learn how to spend well and live rich. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're immersing ourselves in some of the most I guess you'd call it unflinching financial wisdom out there.
Oh, absolutely. It's very tough love, but in the best way possible.
Right. We're looking at the life of a woman affectionately known as Big Mama. And her story is just wild. She managed to raise 5 grandchildren on a salary of less than $13,000 a year.
Yeah, and what makes that so compelling isn't just that she survived. It's that she triumphed. She actually retired completely free of debt.
On that salary.
On that exact, incredibly modest income. She even owned her home outright. So today we're exploring the 10 specific secrets derived from her lived experience.
Which really challenges that whole modern assumption that building wealth is just about, your income bracket.
Exactly. The core thesis here is that financial freedom is dictated by how you manage what you already have. It's not about endlessly chasing a higher salary just to fund a bigger lifestyle.
Okay, let's just jump right into it. Secret 1, live in a mental recession. Now, I have to be honest, this first concept sounds a little miserable.
I get that. It definitely sounds intense at first glance.
Yeah, because the source material argues that escaping the debt trap requires us to basically overhaul our entire mindset about the economy. Big Mama operated her whole life as if a recession was either happening right now or starting tomorrow.
Right. She just assumed prices were about to spike and her job was in jeopardy.
But wait, here's where I want to push back. She worked as a nursing assistant at the exact same hospital for 25 years. She was never late.
Not even once, yeah.
So her job was incredibly secure. Doesn't living like the sky is always falling just, flood your system with cortisol? That sounds less like a financial strategy and more like chronic anxiety to me.
Well, that assumption makes total sense on the surface. But if you look at the actual psychological mechanics, it's a totally different reality.
How so?
There's a massive behavioral difference between blind panic and defensive preparation. Living in a mental recession doesn't mean you're paralyzed by fear. It means you are actively neutralizing risk.
Oh, interesting. So it's about control.
Precisely. When you artificially restrict your own consumption, like, say, by ignoring a booming economy or a sudden holiday bonus, you build this invincible buffer. The anxiety most people feel actually comes from living right on the razor's edge of their income.
Right, where one missed paycheck means total disaster.
Exactly. But by voluntarily living below her means, Big Mama was mathematically insulated from panic. If a real recession hit, her lifestyle didn't have to change at all.
Because she was already living lean.
Yeah, she lived a lean, highly capitalized life and rejected the whole concept of quote-unquote good debt entirely. Defensive planning actually buys you immense psychological serenity.
That makes a lot of sense. Which leads us to the next point, secret 2. If it's on your ass, it's not an asset.
I love that quote so much.
It's hilarious, right? Once you've adopted that mental recession framework, the text pushes you to ruthlessly audit your physical surroundings. And what we find is that Americans are aggressively hoarding items that plummet in value the second they're purchased.
Oh, it's a genuine crisis. We are so overwhelmed by our own depreciating personal property, our clothes, shoes, cars, that we currently support over 38,000 self-storage facilities across the country.
Just to house the overflow of things we don't even use.
Right. And the terminology we use really matters here. People casually refer to their expensive car or their designer wardrobe as their assets.
But they're really not.
No, not at all. An appreciating asset is a mechanism that actually generates wealth over time. Like investments, cash reserves, real estate. Personal property is almost exclusively a depreciating liability.
And Big Mama had a really blunt way of framing this, didn't she?
She did. She observed that when you pay a massive premium for a pair of designer jeans, the only person building actual wealth is the designer.
Right.
The buyer, in her words, just becomes the ass who funded someone else's prosperity.
I just love that framing. It's like we're treating our master closets as if they were high-end investment portfolios, but we're deliberately picking stocks that are mathematically guaranteed to lose 90% of their value the absolute second we cut the tags off.
That is a perfect analogy. We wouldn't accept that return on investment in a retirement account,
Yep.
but we happily accept it at the mall every single weekend.
So true. And the financial damage of that is highly quantifiable, isn't it?
Very much so. The source material draws a hard line. If your debt-to-income ratio, entirely excluding your rent or mortgage, begins creeping past that 15 to 20% threshold, you've crossed into a crisis zone.
Wow, 15%, that sneaks up fast.
It really does. At that point, you are systematically mortgaging your future autonomy simply to project the optical illusion of wealth right now.
Which perfectly sets up the next lesson. Secret 3. Interrogate your needs versus wants.
This is where it gets uncomfortable for a lot of people.
Yeah, because it brings up a glaring question. If pouring our hard-earned money into depreciating liabilities is so destructive, why do intelligent people keep doing it?
Well, the material points to a really profound societal delusion. We've entirely lost the cognitive ability to distinguish between what we genuinely need to survive and what we simply desire in the moment.
Right, the line is just completely blurred. The source actually shares this staggering case study from the Oprah show about a couple named Kimberly and Chris.
Oh, their story perfectly illustrates this blind spot. So combined, Kimberly and Chris were earning $85,000 a year.
Which is a very solid middle-class income.
It is. Yet they were drowning in $50,000 of credit card debt.
Oh my God.
And it was heavily distributed across 15 different cards. They had a basement packed to the ceiling with expensive toys and gadgets, but their actual savings account held exactly $200.
$200, wow.
Yeah, and when they were pressed on their spending habits, they vehemently argued that premium cable television and top-tier cell phone plans were absolute non-negotiable necessities.
Like they literally believed they could not function without them.
Exactly. The baseline for survival had experienced so much lifestyle creep that luxury had been entirely reclassified as a physiological need.
That is wild. The book actually offers a fascinating, almost painful diagnostic test for this specific delusion.
Oh, the credit card test.
Yes, you take your latest credit card statement, physically cover up the itemized list of what you bought, and just stare at the dollar amounts.
Yeah.
Then you try to recall exactly what you purchased for each amount.
And if you can't remember.
Yeah, exactly. The harsh reality is if you cannot even remember what the item was, there's absolute zero chance it was an actual need.
It's a brutal reality check.
But diagnosing the problem is one thing. In the real world, when you're exhausted, scrolling on your phone and being bombarded by highly targeted advertising, how do you practically short-circuit that impulse before you click buy?
The author lays out 3 highly tactical circuit breakers for this exact situation. First, you implement a mandatory, non-negotiable 24-hour waiting period for any purchase that isn't groceries or basic utilities.
Just to let the feeling pass.
Right. It allows the initial neurochemical rush of the impulse to dissipate. Second, you maintain a spending journal. You're forced to document the emotional state driving the purchase.
Oh, I like that. Asking yourself, am I actually in need of a new sweater, or am I just stressed from work and seeking a quick hit of retail therapy?
Exactly. And the third is establishing a savings sponsor.
Like an accountability partner.
Similar to addiction recovery programs, yeah. It's a trusted friend you have to call to justify the purchase before you make it. Usually just hearing yourself try to justify a midnight shopping spree out loud is enough to break the spell.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Secret 4. Sweat the small stuff. This is a direct attack on a very comforting modern philosophy, isn't it?
It really is. We're constantly told to not sweat the small stuff, focus on the big picture and let the little things slide.
Right, but the source material insists that in the realm of personal finance, this is catastrophic advice.
Utterly catastrophic. It's not just the massive, dramatic purchases that push people into poverty. It's the tiny, invisible, everyday desires that quietly drain your resources dollar by dollar.
Just nickel and diming yourself to death.
Precisely. The math behind those tiny leaks is genuinely shocking when you factor in compound interest. The book breaks it down. If you were to save just $1 single a day from the day you were born until age 65 and invest it at an average 8% return.
Wait, just $1?
$1 a day. You would retire with $1.1 million.
That is unbelievable.
Let's translate that to daily adult habits. Say you drop a routine of grabbing a bagel with cream cheese every morning. You save roughly $117 a year. Invest that relatively tiny amount at 10% over 20 years, it grows to $7,000. Or, skipping a simple $2 daily soda, that leaves you with $500 extra by the end of December. The opportunity cost of capital turns microscopic daily expenses into massive long-term losses.
Okay, I understand the compounding math, but implementing this feels incredibly difficult socially. I mean, a dollar or two feels entirely insignificant when you're standing at a register.
Sure, it does.
And more importantly, when a coworker says, hey, let's all grab lunch down the street, saying no over a $5 or $10 difference makes you feel intensely cheap. You risk alienating people. How do you navigate that friction without becoming a total pariah?
You navigate it by fundamentally reframing what that money represents. You have to stop viewing it as simply being cheap and start recognizing that you're actively purchasing your future autonomy.
Oh, I see.
Every time you redirect a small amount of money away from fleeting consumption, you're buying up shares of your own freedom. Saying no to a casual lunch isn't about hoarding a $5 bill. It's about intentionally funding a debt-free college education for your kid or buying years back from your eventual retirement age.
So the social friction is temporary, but the financial independence is permanent.
Exactly. You must sweat the small stuff because the accumulation of those small, disciplined choices is precisely what constructs the foundation of massive wealth.
That is a powerful shift in perspective. And it brings us to the next point. Secret 5. Cash is better than credit.
This transition feels inevitable.
Totally. Because the primary reason we are able to blindly sweat away both the small stuff and the big stuff without noticing is the mechanism we use to pay for it. Plastic completely anesthetizes us to the pain of losing our resources.
It's a profound behavioral shift. The source references this highly revealing sealed bid auction experiment conducted at MIT.
Oh, tell me about this.
So, researchers auctioned off highly desirable Boston Celtics tickets to two groups of students. The group instructed to bid using cash bid a certain amount. The group told they could pay using a credit card bid exactly twice as much for the exact same tickets.
Twice as much, just because of the payment method.
Yes. Credit cards fundamentally manipulate our psychology. Because there's no physical friction, you swipe a card and the card is immediately handed back to you. Your brain's pain centers, which usually activate when handing over physical bills, are completely bypassed.
Wow.
It creates this powerful cognitive illusion that you are utilizing abstract, infinite resources rather than your own finite labor.
That perfectly explains the delusion of credit card bargain shopping the text mentions. Like, if you find a $30 pair of shoes marked down to $15 and you swipe a credit card to get them, you didn't magically save $15.
Nope, you just acquired $15 of high-interest debt using someone else's money.
But what about the systemic pressures? I constantly hear parents argue that teenagers and college students absolutely need to get a credit card early on, simply to build up a credit score so they can function in modern society.
Yeah, the author vigorously dismantles that justification. The brutal truth is that the only practical thing a teenager needs a credit score for is to acquire more debt. Unless they are actively preparing to secure a mortgage for a home, they should be operating entirely on a cash basis. Handing a teenager a revolving credit card just trains them to be comfortable living as a debtor before they've even established a professional career.
So what should parents do instead?
If a parent insists on building a financial history for their child, the only acceptable tool is a strict charge card that legally requires the balance to be paid in full at the end of every single month. That teaches the mechanics of the system without introducing the lethal trap of compound interest working against them.
That's incredibly practical. All right, moving to the next rule. Secret 6, keep it simple to avoid scammers. This ties directly into the danger of credit, right?
Yes, because heavy reliance on borrowed money inevitably breeds financial desperation.
And when people are suffocating under debt and looking for a lifeline, they become the prime targets for a secondary wealth killer. Sophisticated, complex financial scams.
Desperation completely overrides critical thinking. Big Mama understood this intuitively, which is why her golden rule was relentless simplicity.
The book had a great line about her bonds.
Yeah. The only bond she ever utilized was the physical adhesive holding her dentures in place. She parked her modest savings in a basic passbook account, and because she never engaged with financial vehicles she didn't fully comprehend, she was never conned.
It's so smart. The Federal Trade Commission actually warns about what they call last dollar frauds, right?
Yes. These scammers prey specifically on the financially exhausted. They promise miraculous credit card rate reductions, they pitch fake prime bank debentures, or they sell these phantom work-at-home assembly schemes.
And their primary weapon is just confusing vocabulary?
Exactly. They intentionally flood the victim with dense, sophisticated financial jargon.
I could visualize exactly how that works. It's like a sketchy mechanic trying to sell you a used car,
Yeah.
but absolutely refusing to pop the hood so you can look at the engine. Instead, they just stand there aggressively shouting big words at you, talking about irrevocable lines of credit and syndicated debt tranches, until you feel so thoroughly intimidated that you just hand over your life savings to make the uncomfortable conversation end.
That is the exact psychological mechanism at play. They weaponize your embarrassment. The crucial takeaway here is that in personal finance, ignorance is actually your strongest defensive shield.
That sounds counterintuitive.
I know, but if a salesperson, a broker, or even a relative cannot explain the mechanics of a financial product to you in plain conversational English, your only logical move is to immediately walk away. Complexity is the environment where con artists thrive. Maintaining absolute simplicity in your financial life is the ultimate barrier against fraud.
That is brilliant advice. Okay, secret 7. Priorities lead to prosperity. To actually maintain that simplicity and have the fortitude to ignore all the complex noise and social pressure, you have to possess a crystal clear understanding of exactly what you are saving your money for.
Because without firm priorities, you will just naturally drift into debt. The text utilizes a classic principle here. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
So follow the money.
Exactly. It suggests a brutal but effective audit. If you want to uncover your true unspoken priorities, don't look at what you claim to care about. Look at your bank statement. Your spending history tells the unvarnished truth.
Wow, that's confronting.
It is. If your genuine priority is ensuring your children can graduate from college completely debt-free, that deeply rooted goal will serve as armor. It makes you entirely deaf to their temporary complaints when you refuse to buy them a $90 designer sweatshirt or the latest gaming console.
So you really have to eliminate this idea of extra spending money.
You must permanently eradicate the phrase disposable income from your mindset. There is no money waiting to be disposed of. Every single dollar you acquire must be given a specific forward-looking assignment.
That makes logical sense. But the emotional reality of parenting involves massive external pressure. How do you withstand the judgment of your own community? What happens when well-meaning relatives accuse you of actively depriving your children just because they don't have a perfectly coordinated brand-name outfit for every single day of the week?
That is exactly when you have to heavily lean into Big Mama's boot camp mentality. You must aggressively tune out the opinions of other people.
Which is easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. But it requires accepting a difficult truth. If your priority is long-term prosperity, you are mathematically guaranteed to look very different from the heavily indebted majority around you today.
Right.
If you choose to dress, drive, and consume exactly like the average American, you are actively choosing to be suffocated by debt exactly like the average American. Achieving financial security demands that you become entirely comfortable being viewed as the odd one out.
I really love that perspective.
Please.
Secret 8. Know when enough is enough. Establishing those firm priorities forces you into a reckoning with modern consumer culture, doesn't it?
It does. It leads to the realization that you simply cannot have it all, and the perpetual exhausting chase for more will eventually cost you your actual life.
The author shares a really striking, deeply personal anecdote regarding this exact breaking point.
Yeah, she found herself caught in the trap of overworking, constantly taking on supplementary assignments, and generating immense stress to the point where her family life was deteriorating. Her husband, Kevin, staged a vital intervention with one simple question.
When is enough enough?
Exactly, and it forced her to calculate what she calls her real hourly wage. This is such a profound exercise.
How does that work?
Imagine you earn $50 an hour on paper, but to maintain the job, you have to buy expensive, trendy office clothing, you have to pay for a grueling commute, and because the job makes you miserable, you have to book lavish, expensive vacations just to decompress and convince yourself it's all worth it.
Right, you're spending money just to cope with making the money.
Exactly. When you subtract the immense cost of simply maintaining your employment, your real functional wage might plummet closer to $12 an hour.
That is terrifying. But questioning the pursuit of more feels almost un-American, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Our entire economic engine is built on endless scaling. Even our entertainment reflects this. Game shows don't ask who wants to achieve a comfortable equilibrium. They ask who wants to be a millionaire.
They do, yeah.
Doesn't voluntarily settling for enough imply that you have surrendered your drive and lost your ambition?
No,
Yeah.
it doesn't extinguish ambition at all. It completely redirects it.
Yeah.
It demands a sophisticated reframing of what constitutes success. True, evolved ambition isn't about accumulating infinite consumer jugs. It is about reclaiming the finite hours of your life.
Reclaiming time.
Yes. The statistical reality is that the vast majority of people will never reach millionaire status. Willingly sacrificing your physical and mental health to acquire depreciating luxury items that you don't even have the free time to enjoy is the worst possible return on investment.
That makes sort of sense.
Recognizing and accepting when you have secured enough is the pinnacle of financial intelligence, because it is the exact moment you transition from working to exist to actually living.
Man, that is powerful. Okay, moving on to secret 9. Never, ever co-sign alone. Once you've done the hard work of defining what enough looks like for your own household, you are inevitably forced to defend those boundaries against the people closest to you.
And this brings us to what might be the most uncomfortable relationship rule in personal finance.
Big Mama's stance on this was legendary for its absolute zero-tolerance policy, wasn't it?
Oh, absolutely. When her own granddaughter approached her, asking her to co-sign a loan for a vehicle, Big Mama flatly refused.
Her logic was just unassailable.
She said, if the bank and institution specifically designed to calculate financial risk doesn't think you are able to handle the loan, then what makes you think I can handle it?
It's so harsh, but so true.
And the data overwhelmingly supports her harshness. Statistics show that roughly 3 out of every 4 co-signed loans that eventually go into default end up being forcefully repaid by the co-signer.
3 out of 4.
Yes. The advice here is rigid. If you genuinely desire to assist a struggling relative, you should give them the money directly as a cash gift from a specifically designated needy family fund in your budget. But if you do not have the liquid cash to hand over, you must never lend them your hard-earned credit score.
I always try to visualize the mechanics of this. Co-signing a loan for someone who has already demonstrated bad credit is effectively like jumping out of a perfectly good airplane while strapped to a tandem partner who has already proven they have no idea how to operate a parachute. You aren't helping them fly, you're just ensuring that both of you are going to hit the ground at terminal velocity.
That analogy perfectly captures the shared destruction. It requires an emotionally difficult realization. Expressing true love sometimes mandates saying a firm no. By refusing to co-sign, you enforce a boundary that forces your loved one to directly experience the natural consequences of their own financial behavior. Often, hitting that wall of reality is the only catalyst powerful enough to teach them actual financial independence. You must secure your own financial foundation first. It's the fundamental prerequisite to ever being in a position to truly help anyone else.
Absolutely. Okay, we've arrived at the final lesson. Secret 10. Embrace the $100 holiday in regifting. Maintaining these strict boundaries with your loved ones reaches its absolute peak difficulty during the holiday season. The cultural pressure to spend makes this the final boss of spending well.
The weaponization of guilt during the holidays is a massive driver of consumer debt. Just consider the scale of the problem. Nearly 40% of Americans purchase gifts for 15 or more individuals during the holiday season.
15 people. That's exhausting just to think about.
It is. And to meet this entirely artificial obligation, many people take on seasonal second jobs, actively sacrificing the limited time they have with their own children just to purchase trivial items that nobody genuinely needs.
Like novelty singing fish or obscure kitchen gadgets destined to gather dust in a drawer.
Exactly. The source material counters this madness by introducing the $100 holiday protocol, strictly capping total spending. Furthermore, it explicitly and unapologetically defends the taboo practice of regifting.
Regifting.
Yes. If you are given an item that serves no purpose in your life, but it remains in pristine condition, passing it on is not an insult. It is an environmentally conscious, financially intelligent redistribution of resources.
The social blowback can be intense, right? What happens when a family member discovers you regifted something, or they notice your dramatically scaled-back budget, and they loudly label you a cheapskate or a Grinch for ruining the spirit of the season?
You fall back on Big Mama's ultimate, unvarnished truth regarding those critics. They ain't your friend anyway.
I love that.
You have to completely reframe the purpose of the season. By capping your spending and ignoring the retail hysteria, you are securing the ultimate gift for your own family. guaranteed financial stability for the impending year.
Which is priceless.
Exactly. A gift is a transfer of goodwill, and its acceptance should always be graceful. The retail price tag attached to an item has absolutely zero correlation with its actual worth or the genuine love behind the gesture.
Beautifully said.
And if we step back and synthesize all 10 of these profound secrets, we're left with a transformative question. What if the absolute greatest luxury that money can eventually buy isn't a prestigious designer label, and it isn't a luxury vehicle sitting in the driveway?
What if it's not stuff at all?
Exactly. What if the highest form of wealth is simply the absolute freedom to say no to a job that makes you miserable, and yes to a random Tuesday afternoon spent playing with your family? Every single time you make the conscious decision to starve your debt, you are actively feeding your future autonomy.
We've covered incredible ground today. We've gone from looking at our own closets as if they were catastrophic investment portfolios to realizing that our smallest, most mundane daily choices are the literal currency that dyes our future freedom. The often murky, intimidating waters of personal finance don't require complex jargon or Wall Street algorithms to navigate successfully. Sometimes you just need the unflinching, tough love wisdom to recognize that if it's on your ass, it's not an asset. Thank you for watching Drive. Please like, share, subscribe, follow up in next video.